Colleagues, if you could kindly take your seats, please, and make sure you insert your voting card. We're just trying to keep track of where we are on the quorum, but we're quite a way away yet. So the more of you that take your place, the sooner we can get started. Thank you. So parties, again, I encourage you to take your seats and insert your voting cards. We don't have a quorum yet, so the sooner you're all seated and we get a quorum, the sooner we can start. Thank you. Right. Delegates, colleagues, we now have a quorum, so we will begin our afternoon session of Committee 1. I hope you've all managed to find some lunch and there wasn't too many queues. Of course, we enjoy queuing in the UK. But just before lunch, we had document 87.2, on aquatic species listed in the CITES appendices, introduced to us by Senegal. And Senegal have modified their original proposal to a proposed set of decisions, which in summary would ask the Secretariat, subject to funding, to create a technical workshop to look at the differences in, between chondrichthyans and other vulnerable commercially exploited species, with potential amendments to Conference Resolution 924, detailed in paragraph of Section 6 of Document 87.2, to invite all interested parties and then to provide the report of such a workshop to the Animals Committee, who can make recommendations to the Standing Committee, who in turn might make recommendations to the 20th Conference of the Parties. So that's just a quick summary of it. So I hope I've captured that correctly, Senegal. So with that, I now open the floor to comments from parties on these proposed set of draft decisions. So the floor is now open. And I see the European Union followed by Japan, then Bangladesh. So European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Thank you too to Senegal for preparing working document 87.2 on a new approach to the listing of sharks and rays, and also for the suggested way forward and draft decisions that you presented this morning. We welcome the suggestion to set up an in-session working group. We also welcome that the proposed draft decisions do not only focus on chondrichthyans. However, we would also like to come back to the original proposal, which highlights the need for a revision of the footnote in Annex 5 to Res Conf 9.24, between brackets, Rev CoP19, close brackets. This footnote, on application of decline for commercially exploited aquatic species, establishes a special regime for the listing of some aquatic species. However, in practice, the footnote has been difficult to implement and has been the source of misunderstandings. The scope of the application of the footnote should be clarified, especially if the sentence, nevertheless, some species may fall outside this range, in the first paragraph of the footnote, which notes that not all commercially exploited aquatic species should be subject to the footnote. An in-session working group provides an excellent opportunity to discuss these issues and to find the best way forward for all aquatic taxa with slow growth rates and a low reproductive outputs. And the EU is ready to participate in such an exchange. Again, we would like to thank Senegal for initiating this discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. And I now give the floor to Japan, to be followed by Bangladesh, then China. So, Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Japan has a concern about the original Senegal proposal. The footnote on the commercially exploited aquatic species in Resolution 9.24 was prepared by experts after a long time review and discussion based on the scientific findings. Therefore, it is quite inappropriate for a proposal of the COP meeting, which cannot take sufficient time for scientific discussion. Since the productivity of the aquatic species varies widely from the species to species, and it's not possible to discuss the decline of the population uniformly and quantitatively. The footnote adapted to the 5 to 20% as a guideline for commercially exploited aquatic species. And the resolution also clearly states that there are species that do not fall within this range. In addition, there is a wide range of the productivity among the aquatic species, and it is scientifically inappropriate to unnecessarily widen the range of the percentage of the abundance decline from the standard value to the 5 to 30% by focusing only on the certain taxonomic groups such as shark and rays. If the range of the value of the decline were to be changed, it will be necessary to re-examine the issue scientifically on the zero-based basis. But from the scientific viewpoint, we see no need to do so. The proposal, Senegal's proposal, does not provide a detail of the references cited and the scientific data. And in general, the quality of the scientific evidence is not sufficient. In addition, the proposal only discusses the listing the criteria for the inclusion in the appendices and make no mentions of the most important effectiveness of the species conservation through the inclusion in the appendices. It must be said that the purpose of this document proposal is to make the listing the appendices easier by lowering the listing criteria. Therefore, Japan does not accept this document proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. I now give the floor to Bangladesh to be followed by China.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since this is the first time Bangladesh is taking the floor, we want to thank the government of Panama for hosting this meeting and the CITES Secretariat for their tireless effort. We also congratulate you on your election as committee chair. Bangladesh fully supports Senegal's proposal and their proposed way forward by means of a working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh. I now give the floor to China to be followed by Sri Lanka. China, you have the floor.
China does not support the amendments to the footnote of Resolution Conference 9.24 and the draft decision of workshop discussion. The proposed amendments in the document lack scientific basis and could lead to more commercially exploited aquatic species being listed in CITES, cause management difficulties. With reference to CITES Resolution Conference 12.6, parties realized that unregulated and unreported trade is contributing to unsustainable fishing of a number of shark species. FAO implemented IPOA shark plan in 1999, and the states are encouraged to adopt NPOA sharks. The agreement on port state measures to prevent, deter, and eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing was entering into force in 2016. The Resolution Conference 12.6 instructs Secretariat to maintain close collaboration with FAO and other relevant international organizations to improve coordination and synergies in the implementation of CITES provisions for CITES-listed shark species. Based on the management progress of CITES-listed listed sharks, China suggests that CITES needs to have more cooperation with FAO and other relevant organizations to promote shark management effectiveness, rather than having more sharks listed in CITES. We agree with Secretariat's comments on this document and does not support the proposed new decision also. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I now give the floor to Sri Lanka, followed by Gabon. Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time Sri Lanka are taking the floor, we take this opportunity to extend our appreciation and gratitude to the government of Panama for their kind hospitality and to organizing this wonderful venue for CITES CoP19. We also congratulate you, Mr. Chair, on your successful nomination and wish you all the best over the coming days. To keep this short, we support the position of Senegal and the European Union on document 87.2 as we recognize that most sharks and rays do not have similar reproductive life history with other commercially harvested fish, despite the fact that they share the same marine environment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sri Lanka. And I now give the floor to Gabon, followed by Mali, then Liberia.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before presenting Gabon's position on the draft decisions submitted by Senegal on the basis of the original document, Gabon would like to recall parties that this document proposes that parties re-examine the way they include species in the appendices and examine as well the different areas of the convention and the criteria of submitting on the basis of those criteria, of the CITES criteria. Document CoP19. This document indeed includes that the inscription of these species be included on the basis of scientific criteria, bearing in mind that these species have biological criteria that differentiate them from other species. Gabon would like to support all draft proposals by Senegal, as well as the establishment of a working group. We would like to encourage as well other parties to support these draft proposals as submitted by Senegal, recalling that the scientific data and scientific proof has been submitted by Senegal and Sri Lanka during its last intervention, recalled all this scientific data that must be taken into account. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Gabon. I now give the floor to Mali, to be followed by Liberia and then the Gambia. So Mali, you have the floor.
Okay, merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mali is taking the floor for the first time in this committee. We would like to thank the population and authorities of Panama for their hospitality. And we have followed all the explanations given by Senegal. We agree and we support their proposal, their draft proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mali. So I now give the floor to Liberia, followed by the Gambia.
Let me first of all, on behalf of the Liberian delegation, extend my profound thanks and gratitude to the government of Panama, and also you as being elected as the chair of Committee 1. I also say thank you for you and your corps of officers, and I wish you preside over this session to have a success. But let me join Senegal, the EU, and other parties who are in support of this and proposal that is being put forward for the sustainable conservation of our remaining species of sharks and rays within the biodiversity or within our marine territory. It is very much crucial because if you look at the wave of which harvesting is being done and the overexploitation, if we don't put in the requisite and conservation strategy to conserve these species, we might lose most of them. Because if you take a look at some of the status of some of the range states, area where some of the species were found, they can no longer be found there. So with Senegal coming up with this new listing and the new approach, I think it's a good approach for us to support them highly in order to save the next remaining population on the earth. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liberia. And I now give the floor to the Gambia, followed by the United States and then Canada.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Let me begin by congratulating you for the appointment to be the chair of this session, and also reiterate our sincere appreciation for the warm welcome and then the reception we received from the Panama government and the people of Panama. So the Gambia would like to add its voice to support Senegal and EU and others who have spoken in favor of this proposal. We support this document because sharks and rays are important resources for us. Listing criteria for these species should be adjusted so that international trade is regulated through Appendix 2 listing in time to prevent depletion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, the Gambia. I now give the floor to the United States, followed by Canada, then the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin with the document that was proposed. The United States does not support reopening the CITES listing criteria in Resolution Conf 924 Rev Cop 17 for amendment. The footnote in Annex 5 was painstakingly negotiated and developed following years of contentious debate about the listing of commercially exploited aquatic species in CITES, and has largely worked well for marine species. The footnote takes into account marine species' varying levels of productivity and already explicitly recognizes that some species may fall outside of the range within the footnote and should be assessed under the general listing criteria rather than that contained in the footnote. Reopening the criteria to amend that footnote would be contentious and would likely upset the delicate balance that's been in that footnote that Annex 5 has provided. And we don't believe that consensus is achievable on amendments to the criteria. We recall that a working group of the Animals Committee established after COP15 looked at the application of Resolution Conf 924 Rev Cop 15 to commercially exploited aquatic species. After 3 meetings and intensive intersessional dialogue, that working group was unable to reach consensus. The conclusion was that there were differing views and the issue should not be pursued further. COP19 will consider proposed changes to Resolution Comp 12.6, Rev Cop 18, on the conservation and management of sharks, and several draft decisions aimed at strengthening and implementation of the Convention for Sharks and Rays. Rather than reopening the CITES listing criteria, a more effective way to ensure sustainable harvest and trade of sharks and rays would be to focus on effective implementation of the CITES listings and those decisions upon adoption. We don't see the need for another technical working group to examine different taxa and the criteria as they apply to different taxa, given the extensive discussion that the parties have had on these issues over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I now give the floor to Canada, followed by the United Kingdom, then the Congo. So, Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Canada appreciates the spirit of the initial proposal and these newly proposed draft decisions, and we fully share the concerns around the conservation of shark species worldwide. However, Canada does have concerns with the original proposed amendments to Resolution 9.24 and the new proposed draft decisions that proposes a technical workshop to provide advice on the aquatic footnote. It is Canada's view that the current aquatic footnote does allow for flexibility for other factors to be considered, such as species with varying life history characteristics. Canada does not necessarily believe it is in the best interest of implementing the convention to start including exceptions for various groups of species in Resolution 9.24. Canada does not think that these amendments or the proposed draft decisions that would include exceptions for groups of species would add any further clarity to Resolution 9.24. and Canada aligns with the views of the U.S. that it's not in the best interest of the Convention to reopen the resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I now give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by the Congo.
Thank you,
have the
Chair.
floor.
We thank Senegal for bringing this important issue to CoP19. The UK remains firmly committed to the effective implementation of CITES aquatic species listings. The UK also recognises that the unique life cycles of sharks and rays, characterised by slow growth rates, long lives and low fecundity, means that a more precautionary approach in their listing in comparison to fish species is justified. We are supportive of the intention of this document, and we agree that further work is needed before opening this item up for discussion. We therefore welcome Senegal's proposal to convene a technical workshop. We look forward to engaging in further conversations to better understand and consider this important issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I now give the floor to Congo. You were on my list, but you've now disappeared. Oh, you're back. I now give the floor to the Congo, followed by the Maldives, then Peru.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the first time the Congo takes the floor in this committee. We would like to thank the government of Panama, as well as its people, for the organization of this meeting and for their very warm welcome to all participants. And we would like to thank you as well, Chair, and congratulate you for your election as chair of this committee. Congo appreciates greatly this document submitted by Senegal, which introduces case studies to demonstrate that listing in Appendix 2 of CITES for sharks and rays have been delayed compared to the adoption of the most strict fishing bans by some regional fishery management organizations and other fishery bodies. This shows a difference between the implementation of Appendix 2 of the CITES, which has as an objective to guarantee that the illegal trade be managed in the national, regional and international frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you, the Congo. I now give the floor to the Maldives, followed by Peru, then Panama. So, Maldives, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time that Maldives is taking the floor, we would like to thank the government and people of Panama for the warm welcome and exceptional hospitality. We also want to congratulate you on your nomination. We wish to express our support to the document proposed by Senegal, and we also support the establishment of a working group. Sharks are apex predators, different from other marine species that are commercially exploited, and is the second most threatened vertebrate group. We believe that the criteria need to be revisited, and we thank Senegal for this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Maldives. I now give the floor to Peru, followed by Panama. And I then have further people on our list. I've got Kenya, then Mauritania. But I think at that point I will close the list to allow some contributions from observers. We've heard a wide range of views, so we will close the list after Mauritania. So I now give the floor to Peru, followed by Panama.
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. Peru supports the proposal for the amendment presented by Senegal due to the fact that it will contribute to the efforts for the conservation of sharks and rays, and in particular and mainly because it plays an important role in the marine environment and ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. I now give the floor to Panama, followed by Kenya, then Mauritania.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome again to Panama to everyone. I hope you're enjoying this beautiful country. Panama apoya la propuesta.
Panama supports the proposal in full from Senegal and what has been mentioned by the European Union to set up a working group. It's not to make listing in Appendix 2 easier, but because scientifically it's correct. Sharks have characteristics that are much closer to mammals than to other fishes. Slow reproduction, few offspring, and it shouldn't be listed under the footnotes, because we're seeing that the science is not always being used as the base of the report. As Japan said, CITES has to be science, and that is the most important. Sharks and rays are more fragile than other fish and are the second most threatened group after amphibians. And often they're more threatened than the large mammals already listed in Appendix 2.
Thank you, Panama. I'll give the floor to Kenya, then Mauritania. So Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Kenya will want to align with those that have supported the proposal by Senegal. Chairman, the proposed amendment will ensure that the criteria are applied in appropriate and flexible manner based on the life species of and history and vulnerability of the sharks and ray, rather than the ecosystem in which they live. Mr. Chairman, we think this will promote the sustainable conservation and use of these species. And we also want to support the proposal by the EU to set up a working group. If it's so decided, Kenya will want to participate in such a working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. I now give the floor to Mauritania.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to join all those who have spoken before me. First of all, to thank the authorities of Panama for hosting this CITES meeting and for all the care that we have received since we arrived and the excellent organization of this meeting. I would also like to congratulate the chair on his election and all that has been entrusted to him. I would like to speak about the proposal from our friends in Senegal. I say that the cause is noble and the means to achieve it have to be considered and mature. And I think that all listings should be based on the relevant, robust scientific data. It's a case of guaranteeing the sustainability and management of populations of rays and sharks. As someone who preceded me has said, there are instruments such as the International Plan for the Management of Populations of Sharks and rays from the FAO, and there have been regional solutions, sub-regional solutions such as the West African group, and that a level or on a national level, an instrument was set up to achieve the goal of sustainably conserving the populations. And that's what my country has already done in 2008. So what's important is the approach. Yes, we need a precautionary approach. We need to be careful. These are populations that are slow to mature and have a low reproductive rate. But I think we must, in any case, be very careful when it comes to listings. They have to be well thought. It has implications on certain populations on which sustainable livelihoods depend. So before any listing, we have to look at the issue from various angles and look at the scientific evidence. And we think there's not really a lot of point in setting up a list of listings. We have to bear in mind our goal, which is sustainability. And with the existing instruments, we can evaluate them, improve them, and we can move on a step-by-step basis and not go straight to listing the ultimate arm available to us. So we think that science must guide our choices and decisions in this case, and that is why we would insist once more, and we are very wary of listing a lot, because it's something we should consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauritania. I said I'd quite like to hear from some observers, so I will now open the floor to observers if they have anything something of. I see someone's raising a flag there. I can't see it from here. Could you? So we can see your light flashing, and you may well be on our list. I'm just waiting to see how many requests I get from the floor. No? Yeah. So whoever you were raising the flag, your light is flashing on the microphone. That means you're registered on the screen here. So. Right, okay. So I've got quite a few requests for the floor, including some from parties, but I won't take parties just for the moment. And we've already heard from quite a wide range of parties already, and I close the list. But I'll begin by inviting FAO, if you wish to take the floor, followed by IUCN. So FAO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. FAO wishes to congratulate you on your new role as Chair. I'm confident this will be a very successful Committee 1 under your leadership, with the usual support of the hard-working CITES Secretariat. Also, a large smile and thank you to the government and people of Panama for inviting us to meet so close to two ocean basins on the bridge between the Americas, a truly stunning country. Thank you. In regards to document 87.2 submitted by Senegal, FAO respects the CITES criteria as documented in Conf 9.24, recognizing the significant investment in time and capacity that went into its formulation. In regards to sharks and rays, FAO has re-examined the broad range of variability of life history characteristics across species of cartilaginous fish, and is willing to work on this further and share this information with parties that have an interest in better understanding the detail of issues dealt with in the document 87.2. This examination of scientific information so that considering all cartilaginous fish as one group is not valuable to the management or protection of sharks as rays, as they are indeed species with inherent vulnerable life history characteristics, but equally others have robust characteristics, so there's a large variation. This inherent variability across sharks and rays makes consideration species by species the most progressive and useful approach to take, especially as variability in productivity of aquatic species is already catered for in the CITES criteria as outlined in Conf 9.24. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, FAO. I'll now give the floor to IUCN, followed by the OP's Oceania Foundation, if that's the correct title. So IUCN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time that IUCN is taking the floor, we thank the Government of Panama for their warm welcome, We thank the Secretariat for their hard preparatory work and congratulate you on your election as chair. The IUCN notes that the inherently vulnerable life history strategies of sharks and rays warrants considering them differently in Resolution Conf 9.24 Annex 5 footnote, and is thus worthy of further discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. I give the floor to the OP's Oceania Foundation. Your name is abbreviated on the screen, so you have the floor.
I speak on behalf of Opus Oceania Foundation. As it's the first time we've taken the floor, we'd like to congratulate the chair on his appointment and extend our thanks to the government of Panama for its hospitality and to the Secretariat for its hard work and professionalism in putting on this COP. The real problem here is that the urge to take shortcuts to make the listing of sharks in CITES appendices less complex and speedier is not compatible with good governance. There's no new findings informing this proposal that seeks to undermine the existing criteria that was arrived at by consensus after a prolonged period. There was nothing there was nothing about the biology of sharks that was not known by the makers of the current criteria that is now cited by Senegal. Senegal's proposal says that, and I quote, "the different interpretations of the evidence and the listing criteria has led to disputes as to whether several sharks qualified for listing," end quote. Senegal's preamble highlights how some shark listings were a long time in the making because ascertaining their status proved to be complicated as well as contentious. So in essence, the proposal seeks to reduce the time it takes to get sharks listed and to make this easier to accomplish. But the truth is, the deliberative process for listing sharks is already too rushed. For instance, the time given for the FAO to assemble its advisory committee and its expert panel is already too short. Arguably, the time given to produce evidence and to debate these complex matters properly needs to be extended, not compressed or made less complex. The other problem is that the existing listings have encountered major problems at the level of implementation. So before making it easier to list sharks, we should be looking at why it is that the existing listings aren't working as we thought they should. Opus Oceania Foundation also notes that Senegal's proposal also accepts, and I quote, "CITES Appendix 2 listings are lagging behind the adoption of fisheries prohibitions by some tuna, regional fisheries management organizations, and domestic protections for the same species." But surely, rather than suggesting a problem, it suggests perhaps that the regional management fisheries organizations are very often taking the lead in shark conservation, and this may suggest that CITES intervention may not always be necessary and may do more harm than good by undermining the work of more qualified authorities.
Right. Thank you, OP's Oceania Foundation. You've been speaking for over 3 minutes, and that is, we're very short of time. We're behind on our agenda, so I ask you all to be brief. Just one moment. Thank you for your patience. Still got a few requests from the floor from observers, but I'm not going to take those interventions now because we've heard such a wide range of views already. It's clear that there are very divergent views on the proposals from Senegal. Equally, there is opposition to reopening and looking at 924 and the footnote in more detail. Equally, there's a lot of support to do so. I think the only way forward here is to create a working group, and I will shortly invite participation in that. The terms of reference we will develop and refine, but essentially they will be to look at the draft decisions suggested by Senegal to see if any consensus can be found on a way forward. We will also suggest a chair for that working group, probably not immediately. So in a moment I will invite parties to indicate their participation in the working group and then observers. But I see someone is holding up a flag there and I can't read it. But is your microphone not working or? Poor eyesight up on the top table. So Wildlife Conservation Society. I know your button is pressed, and I know, but I've also got other observers who also want to take the floor, and we are running out of time. I think there will be opportunity for you to participate in the working group. So if the technicians could clear the screen, please. Thank you. So I'll now invite parties to begin with to put themselves forward if they want to be on this working group. I will read out the names. As I read out the names, please press your button so that you disappear from the screen. So at the moment we have United States of America, Argentina, Sierra Leone, Panama, United Republic of Tanzania, Antigua and Barbuda, Somalia, Austria, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Canada, Gabon, Kenya, Brazil, Benin, Sri Lanka, Singapore, China, France, Senegal, Czech Republic, Bahamas, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Japan, Indonesia, Belize, Germany, Italy, Mali, the Gambia, and the Maldives. And that's the list of parties. I'll now invite and Spain. I'll now invite observers who want to take part to press their buttons as well. And I also see Costa Rica. So we have the Conservation Alliance in Kenya, Burkina Faso as a party, WWF, HSI, FAO, Shark Conservation Fund, Law of the Wild, WCS, ZSL, IWMC, Sea Shepherd Legal, Florida International University, Foundation Franz Weber, IUCN, Bloom, Blue Res Trust, IAW, I4, AZA, Erasmo Project, Global Guardian Trust, Defenders of Wildlife, International Coalition of Fisheries, OP's Oceania Foundation, and PADI. We just need to do a few checks of numbers to make sure that parties are not outnumbered by observers. This is a very large working group, and that does make it very difficult to manage and work effectively. I also see the Seychelles on Costa Rica if we hadn't captured you before. So an extremely large working group, clearly a lot of interest, but the aim is clearly not to discuss the footnote or any details of whether the criteria should be amended or not. The focus is on coming up with a set of decisions that might take this work forward in the next intersessional period. So one moment, please. Right, we were just checking our numbers. So we have, I think, a total of 35 parties and about 23 observer bodies. So we will announce details of this working group and how it's going to function and meet, provide terms of reference, and suggest or twist the arm of someone to chair it. So thank you for all your contributions. So for the time being, we adjourn discussions of that document. We now move on to document 54, which is a review of the provisions of Conference Resolution 17.7 on the review of trade in animal specimens reported as produced in captivity. I believe the chair of the Animals Committee sitting at the Switzerland desk is going to introduce this. So Switzerland, or the chair of the Animals Committee, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I present this document on behalf of the Standing Committee. It has been prepared by the Secretariat on behalf of the Standing Committee and in consultation with myself. At its 18th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 18176 and 18177 on review of trade in animal specimens reported as produced in captivity. The Animals Committee was tasked with reviewing Resolution 17.7 and make recommendations to the Standing Committee, and the Standing Committee was to review that report and provide its own recommendation to this conference. Following Animals Committee 31, which was held online in June 2021, and Standing Committee 74, which was held in Lyon in March 2022, a workshop was convened in June 2022 online, which assembled members of the Standing Committee and Animals Committee and other interested parties, in particular those that have been involved in the process already. Based on these discussions, the workshop agreed to a series of amendments to Resolution Conf 17.7 Ref CoP18 that aim to address the concerns raised. The main points of this workshop and reflected in the proposed changes are as follows. Without adequate resources, the proper implementation of this resolution is likely to be compromised in the long term. The working group sees future implementation of Resolution CONF 17.7 Ref CoP18 as an important process to continue, and it may therefore require a budget line from the core funds. In relation to the selection of criteria for choosing species-country combinations for further review, the working group felt that any party wishing to suggest a species-country combination for review should provide a justification to support such a proposal, making the whole process transparent and straightforward. Further, in using IUCN Red List assessments in the selection process, the working group considered it was also important to assess when these assessments were carried out last. The working group also discussed whether criteria 4, reporting of inconsistencies, or 5, incorrect application of source code were appropriate for the AC to consider as they mainly concern implementation issues. The working group decided to retain these criteria as concerns in this regard can be always deferred to the Standing Committee. The working group further agreed with the Animals Committee that breeding biology of species is a key consideration that should be factored into the selection process in identifying species of concern and proposed a new criterion to address this. Other issues discussed were a more technical change in relation to the response time by parties in the process, the sequence of consultations between Animals Committee and Standing Committee, and the process of switching relevant cases between the review of significant trade and the captive breeding processes. The results of the working group's deliberations can be found in the amendments to Resolution CONF 17.7 found in the Annex 1 of this document, and decisions which task the Animals Committee and Standing Committee to further improve the alignment between Resolution CONF 17.7 Ref CoP18 on captive breeding and Resolution CONF 12.8 Ref CoP18 on review of significant trade in Annex 2. Conference of the Parties is therefore invited to adopt the proposed amendments to Resolution CONF 17.7 on a review of trade in animal specimens reported as produced in captivity, as contained in Annex 1, and adopt the draft decision presented in Annex 2, and finally delete decisions 18176 and 18177. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee, for that helpful introduction. So clearly this paper has been subject to a lot of debate, a dedicated workshop. I will open comments on both annexes to parties in a moment. One point I do need to draw your attention to is in Annex 1, which the Chair of the Animals Committee always also referred to. The Standing Committee suggested deleting the paragraph 1, which directs the Secretariat to implement the present resolution subject to available resources. The availability of resources is partly going to be decided by the Budget Committee because they will decide whether funding is likely to be available through core funds or whether external funds are likely to be required. So that's an issue which we can't make a decision on in this committee and may need to be reserved until the final plenary. So I suggest for the moment that we leave that paragraph in brackets, recognizing that we will come back to that in the final plenary once the Budget Committee have had chance to make their deliberations. So putting that to one side, I now open the document and in particular the two annexes for your comments and observations. Floor is open, and I see the United States. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States supports adoption of the proposed amendments to Resolution COP 17.7 Rev COP 18, contained in Annex 1 to document COP19, document 54. We do not support the Secretariat's recommendation to delete the text, in quotes, including its own recommendations in new subparagraph 1, as we believe that the text was proposed in order to make clear that the Standing Committee is not simply relaying the Animals Committee's recommendations, but also adding its own recommendations. However, we will not object if the consensus is to adopt the Secretariat's suggestion. We also support adoption of the draft decisions presented in Annex 2 to the document and deletions of decisions 18.176 and 18.177. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. And I think, although the Secretariat's comments refer to paragraph 1, I think it's actually paragraph L, isn't it?
Yeah, it's L.
So it's paragraph L in the Annex 2, but we understand your point entirely, and you would prefer to retain that text, which is fine. I now have United Kingdom asking for the floor, so you have the floor, UK.
Thank you. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for preparing this document and note that whilst the UK was unable to attend the workshop organised by Switzerland, we provided some written comments, having been involved in the original drafting of this resolution at COP17. We support the adoption of decisions presented in Annex 2 and deletion of decisions 18.176 and 18.177. However, we cannot agree to all of the amendments in Res Comp 17.7 being suggested. We think the proposed addition to Stage 1, Paragraph A, little Roman V5, in square brackets should be deleted, as there is already a mechanism for these sorts of potential cases to be identified and investigated under Article 13, as we can see with the ongoing case with the EU and UK. The proposed new Paragraph F also notes the intention for compliance mechanisms not to be overlapping and duplicative. Hence, our suggestion to delete the proposed additions to Paragraph A, V, in Stage 1. We consider the implementation of Res Comp 17.7 Rev COP 18 should be viewed as core work and not subject to the availability of external resources, at least for producing the summary output from the CITES database using the methodology and screening procedures referred to in paragraph 2 of the resolution. The budget discussions at this COP should consider how to ensure there is budget available for this important work. Thank you.
So, United Kingdom, just to make sure that we have captured your, not your changes, the things you don't want to see changed. I think you're referring to paragraph 1AV and then paragraph F. So if you could just potentially repeat your suggestions there, thank you.
Yep, it's in paragraph 1AV, the additional text that's been proposed, we don't agree with that and think that should be deleted, so that reads, or use of C, F, or R for commercial trade in Appendix 1 species. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, UK, we've captured that. I now see Canada followed by the European Union requesting the floor, so Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the committees and notably the participants of the workshop for bringing this work forward. With regard to the amendments to Resolution COP 17.7 presented in Annex 1, Canada does not support the First Amendment to strike paragraph 1 directing the Secretariat to implement the present resolution subject to available funds. We do not believe that limited core funds should be allocated to this process. With respect to the other amendments proposed for the resolution by the Standing Committee Working Group, We recognize that the committee has not had the benefit of discussing the results of the working group's deliberations. Canada would prefer that these amendments be discussed by the Standing Committee before consideration by the COP. Further, we think that discussion of the selection criteria would be more robust if it benefits from the results of the comparative analysis of resolutions 12.8 and 17.7 proposed at COP19 are completed. For example, in the amendments to stage 1, we note that in the amendments to stage 1, the criteria in paragraph a, v, contains bracketed text, and we presume this meant that consensus was not achieved on this text. Canada would support the deletion of this text as issues around the trade in captive bred specimens are currently under discussion by the Standing Committee as per COP19 document 53. Additionally, the new criteria, VII, requires agreement on the relative difficulty to breed species in captivity. Given that knowledge on how to breed species in captivity is ever-changing, it may be difficult to assess and may be subjective. And for these reasons, we feel further discussion is merited. However, Canada can support the administrative and process amendments proposed throughout the resolution as per Annex 1, and we can accept the selection criteria amendments in the interest of consensus. Canada agrees with the proposed decisions in Annex 2 of the present document to produce a comparative analysis of resolutions 17.7 and 12.8 and draft recommendations to streamline these two processes. In reviewing the two processes, consideration should be given to how they can work synergistically to address specimens in both wild and captive bred trade, as this will likely better elucidate those cases where there is conservation concern. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. Just one moment. Thank you, Canada. We've captured everything there. So I now offer the floor to the European Union, followed by China.
Thank you, Chair. We also thank the Secretariat for the preparation of the document. The review process was adopted in order to detect cases where trade in specimens not of wild source represents a conservation concern, such as in cases of unsustainable offtake and laundering of wild specimens through captive breeding ranching facilities. In the EU, for specimens of Appendix 1 species traded under source code C, the compliance with Resolution 1016 is checked in each individual case of export, meaning that these species unlikely reflect cases of conservation concern. This approach may not be in line with Resolution 1210 to the extent that exports with source code C and purpose code T of specimens produced in captive breeding operations originate from breeders which have not been registered. This issue is subject to an assessment in the context of a possible compliance procedure under Article 13, and we actively support the assessment of this issue. We think that compliance with Resolution 1210 should not be addressed at the same time in the context of the review procedure under Article 17.7. The proposed amendment in paragraph 2, a, v, bears the risk of the review mainly focusing on compliance issues relating to trade in Appendix 1 species traded under a wrong source code, rather than on those cases which are really of genuine conservation relevance. Probably the best approach would not be to amend paragraph 2, a, v, but to delete it completely, because its current content is limited to apparent incorrect use of captive production codes, such as source code D and A. D for exports from facilities that are not registered, and A for animals. These are also compliance issues that should be addressed under Article 13. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I now give the floor to China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. China supports adopting the three draft decisions for the proposed amendments to paragraph B of the resolution that enables a party to refer cases for consideration under this process. It should be further amended to require referrals to be justified with supporting documented evidence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. One moment. Thank you. I see no further requests from the floor from parties, but I'll now invite observers to take the floor. And I see someone holding their hand up there. Is that because the microphone isn't working, or? Yes? Right, your microphone is flashing now, so, okay. Right, so I have a few requests from observers. I will go first to UNEP WCMC. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. UNEP WCMC supports the proposed changes to the draft resolution outlined in Annex 1, but we would like to propose one further change to the selection criteria where we have some concern. This relates to the criterion in small a III on identifying shifts between source codes in the CITES trade database. Our view is that the concern of the Animals Committee predominantly lies with shifts from wild to captive sources, as reflected with the proposed amendment, but less so in terms of shifts between captive source codes. The advice of the participants of the informal workshop held in 2017 was to omit this aspect from the analysis and focus only on shifts from wild to captive sources. We do not consider that an analysis of shifts between captive production source codes would be particularly meaningful. For example, a shift in source code F to C could be completely expected if breeding is well managed. In addition, as the trade data is a compilation of national trade and could include data from multiple breeding facilities, changes in source code within any individual breeding facility cannot be distinguished. It is therefore difficult to interpret any shifts relating to the volume of trade reported between different captive source codes over time. We therefore suggest that the following text in criterion little AIII is deleted as follows. Between different captive production source codes, or, so that this criterion would simply read shifts from wild to captive produced source codes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WCMC. We have that. I will now invite Taronga Wildlife Conservation. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I make this intervention on behalf of Taronga Conservation Society Australia and the Zoo and Aquarium Association of Australasia. Taronga supports the intent of the proposals put forward in Document 54. As an organisation that has bred more than 55,000 animals that were subsequently released to bolster wild populations, Taronga is well aware of the effort and expertise that is needed for effective and reliable captive breeding. We encourage parties concerned with the laundering of wild-caught specimens as captive bred to attend a side event entitled Novel Forensic Tool to Combat Illegal Wildlife Trade using Elemental Analysis of Animal Keratin to Determine Provenance. The event will be held on the afternoon of the 24th of November at 5:15 p.m. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Taronga Wildlife Conservation. I give the floor to AWI, followed by the International Iguana Foundation, and then that's it. I will close the list. AWI, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of the Animal Welfare Institute, Born Free, Lewis and Clark College Global Law Alliance, Eurogroup for Animals, Pro Wildlife, Humane Society International, Cheetah Conservation Fund, Foundation Franz Weber, David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, Species Survival Network, and the Pan-African Sanctuary Alliance. The review of trade in animal specimens reported as produced in captivity is a relatively new CITES process. Adherence to this process is important because CITES rules allow for commercial trade in Appendix 1 species bred in captivity. It is therefore vital that parties have confidence in the legitimacy of claims that specimens are captive bred. We therefore agree that core CITES funds should be used to support this process. In addition to supporting the recommendations in CoP19 Doc 54, we support the inclusion, as noted by the distinguished chair of the Animals Committee, of the date of the most recent IUCN assessment in the selection process for species country combinations, since such assessments can rapidly become out of date. Consideration should also be given to new information on the status of and threats to species, especially for species that may be adversely affected by relatively low trade volumes and their breeding biology, in order to determine the likelihood that captive breeding facilities could produce the reported number of specimens in trade. Finally, species country combinations already under consideration through other CITES compliance processes should only be removed from the review if concerns related to captive breeding and production will be duly considered under those alternative processes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Animal Welfare Institute. I now go as a final request for the floor to the International Iguana Foundation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and warm congratulations on your election as chair of this committee. The International Iguana Foundation would also like to thank Switzerland for sponsoring the workshop which produced this document. As critically endangered iguana species are sometimes trafficked and later issued CITES permits in wealthy nations, falsely declared as captive bred sometimes, this document is of great interest to us. Of course, this problem impacts many other species, from parrots to turtles to orchids and onward. As such practices undermine the integrity of the CITES Appendix 2 permitting system, which is the heart and soul of this convention. It encourages traffickers to deal in smuggled founder stock. We urge the parties to continue to address this problem. Towards that end, we recommend a small but consequential amendment to Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev COP 18. That is, and I'll be slow here, under Stage 1, little a, Roman numeral 6, we recommend that the words or exports be added within the parentheses at the end of the sentence. And I would ask any parties to endorse this suggested amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, International Iguana Foundation. We'll just consult with the Secretariat to make sure we've captured all the changes, and then I will summarize where we've got to. So one moment, please. Thank you. Right, so to conclude, I've not heard any opposition to the proposed draft decisions, nor to the deletion of the existing decisions. So I think we can go forward on that basis. We've had a few comments from, on the draft revisions to the resolution in Annex 1. Two are proposed by observers. In Stage 1, Paragraph A3, WCMC suggested deleting between different captive production source codes, or to make the text read shifts from wild to captive produced source codes. And then the International Iguana Association suggested inserting or exports into the parentheses in paragraph A, Roman 6. Now, clearly, ideally, these could be supported by parties, but we can do it in reverse, in effect. If no one has any objections to those amendments, then we can consider them adopted. Canada, expressed some reservations over paragraph A7, I think, but also indicated that they would be willing to live with these in order to achieve consensus, and no one else has suggested any changes there. In paragraph A, Roman 5, V, suggestions to remove the brackets from around or use of C, F, or R for commercial trade in Appendix 1 species. Equally, I think the European Union suggested they preferred to delete that entire paragraph. Is that correct? Sorry, to delete the bracketed text. So we need to resolve that. The final change is in paragraph B, where I think China suggested that where it reads, including any cases referred to it by parties, that text was inserted that said, I think, supported by documentary evidence is what I captured. So those are the changes proposed. Just one. And yeah, just to come back to paragraph A, Roman 5, with a V. Yeah, it'd be quite useful to hear from the EU your opinion, basically, based on what you've heard, whether you can live with the paragraph as it stands, or whether you want to delete it entirely. So, European Union, you have the floor, and then I see a request from Switzerland also.
Thank you, Chair. We could also live in the interest of consensus. We could also live with the solution that was proposed by the UK to leave out the bracketed text and to keep the rest of paragraph little v. And we could also live with the suggested change at the beginning of the paragraph little v. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, European Union. I think that is a big help to us if you're prepared to do that. So we will live with the paragraph as it stands, but with the deletion of the bracketed text. Yes, and also with the existing deletion around A for animal species. But Switzerland, or Chair of the Animals Committee, you also have the floor now.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry if I have to prolong this. Concerning the suggestion by the Iguana Foundation in paragraph Roman 6, we are looking trade from non-range status of specimens declared as produced in captivity with no evidence of lawful acquisition of the parental breeding stock, which means no recorded imports. So I don't quite understand why we want to add "and exports." What information would that give us to choose a party based on that? So I'm not quite sure if this helps a lot in choosing country-species combination of concern. Maybe that the Iguana Foundation could help me out there. Thanks.
And the International Iguana Foundation have asked for the floor, so perhaps they can try and explain their amendment to you. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Switzerland, for that question. Our concern in this process is that a lack of exports of animals should also be an indicator that perhaps permits should not be issued for captive bred animals. If there is a more appropriate location within this resolution to place equally effective language, we would of course be very happy. But we are concerned that animals move between countries when there is no evidence of lawful export. I'd be happy to discuss this in greater detail if that would be helpful, but I'm sure it would not. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I think we understand that more fully now. I think the issue here is this is about trade from non-range states, rather than trade or the absence of trade from range states. So I think Switzerland's point, or the Chair of the Animals Committee point, is that in that context it doesn't make sense. So given that I'm not seeing any other parties asking for the floor to support that, I suggest we delete that suggested insertion so that paragraph A, Roman 6, remains as it is. And with that, and with no further requests for the floor, I think we can conclude our discussions on this topic. So thank you very much for that. We can now move on to the first item on this afternoon's agenda. One moment. That's a good point. Yes, I'm being too hasty, and so I need to sum up probably exactly where we got to. So the very first paragraph, paragraph 1, which is in brackets but deleted, a number of people have expressed comments on that. I think Canada did not support deletion of paragraph 1. But I think the point I was trying to make at the beginning is that that is not a decision that we can make in this committee. It will be up to the Budget Committee to decide if core funds would be allocated or not to this, to the implementation of this resolution. And therefore, all the parties, or parties have representation in the Budget Committee. You can make the case there for this to be subject to external resources or subject to core funds. But essentially, we can't resolve it here. So I think we leave the paragraph as it is, but recognizing that we need to come back to it in plenary session. So the other changes that we have made, just to confirm, in A3, we have deleted the text that WCMC suggested, which read between different captive production source codes or. So it just reads shifts from wild to captive produce source codes. In paragraph 5, we have deleted the bracketed text at the end of the paragraph, and the other deletions there still stand. We have not made any change to A Roman 6. And in paragraph B, we have the addition of text suggested by China, referred to it by parties, and supported by documentary evidence. So I think that sums up all the changes. Check with my secretariat colleague, I haven't missed anything.
Just to say that the numbering will obviously...
And also to remind people that the numbering may sort of change in the kind of revised version. So I think with that, we can now move on to the start of this afternoon's agenda. And that's moving on to document 61, which is on eels and anguilla species. And I invite the Animals Committee Chair through Switzerland to introduce the document. So you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I present this document on behalf of the Standing Committee, which, in consultation with the Chair, with myself, has submitted the document to CoP19. At its 18th meeting, the Conference of the Party adopted a range of decisions, 18197 to 18202 on eels and anguilla SPP. They were directed to range states of anguilla, range states of other anguilla species in international trade, the Secretariat, the Animals and Standing Committee, as well as to donors and other organizations. The intention of these decisions was that parties had to get a better overview of the NDFs already in place for the only CITES listed anguillid, anguilla, to make sure this information is shared and evaluated, and that shared stocks are better managed at the level of the whole species. In relation to other anguillid species in international trade, decisions aimed at making sure trade in these species is sustainable and shared stocks are managed between parties concerned, and that this information is made available. In order to gather the information sought by these decisions, the Secretariat developed a questionnaire which was made available via notification to the parties. The results of the replies received from 27 parties were analyzed by the Animals Committee and the Standing Committee in their meetings. The results of the deliberation in the AC at its 31st meeting in June 2021 can be summarized as follows. The Animals Committee will reconsider the use of source code R and the risks associated with the reintroduction of seized live glass eels to the wild when the finished study on levels of trade and trade patterns at the next meeting of the AC following COP19 will be available. The Animals Committee noted that anguilla might be a good case study for the NDF workshop under Decision 18132, and submitted corresponding draft decision to SC74 for submission to COP19. The results of the discussions at SC74 can be summarized as follows. SC74 invited the Secretariat to review the information on illegal trade in anguilla available from different sources and prepare a consolidated set of draft recommendations for consideration by the Standing Committee at its 75th meeting. In relation to the use of more specific custom code for reporting trade and in anguillid species, SC74 drafted a decision in order to engage with WCO on this matter. And the Standing Committee also agreed with the decision submitted by the Animals Committee with minor additions. So the Conference of the Parties is therefore invited to adopt the draft decision presented in Annex 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee. We are invited to adopt the decisions in Annex 1 as the Chair of the Animals Committee has just suggested. In making your observations, then you may wish to take into account the suggestions of the Secretariat. But with that, I open the floor for any interventions from parties. So, okay, I see United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. It's clear that European eels still face a significant pressure from illegal trade, and therefore further concerted action is needed. We agree with the Secretariat recommendation to delete decisions 18197 to 18202, as these have been completed or are superseded by the draft decisions proposed in this document. We have reflected on the Standing Committee 75 recommendations agreed earlier on in the week, and we have drafted some amendments to the draft decisions amended by the Secretariat to incorporate these agreed decisions. Similarly, over recent COP cycles, we have seen a large number of decisions relating to eels, many of which have been rolled over as ongoing activities, actions, or requests. The UK would like to suggest that the Standing Committee considers intersessionally whether it would be more fit for purpose to the ongoing management of the species for a resolution to be developed encompassing many of these aspects. Accordingly, we have a number of drafting proposals for the draft decisions. We have provided these to the Secretariat ahead of time, but are happy to read them out into the record as needed.
Yes, please, United Kingdom, if you can read them out so that everybody knows your suggested changes. Thank you.
No problem, and apologies for how long this may take. I'll try and go slowly. So on 19AA, we would change it so that it was directed to parties and delete directed to range states of European eels, Anguilla. In the sort of opening line of that decision, we would add transit and importing countries after Anguilla, so that it reads range states of European eel, Anguilla, transit and importing parties are encouraged to. We would insert an additional, a new paragraph A in that decision that would read, strengthen coordination between range states, comma, open brackets, close brackets, exporting and importing parties to improve traceability and effective enforcement measures for trade in Anguilla species, particularly the European eel. For new paragraph D, old paragraph C of that, of decision 19AA, we would replace it with the following text. Implement the reporting recommendations in SC Doc 12 to ensure that, comma, where possible, comma, trade in anguillid eels is reported at species level and differentiated by life stage, open brackets, as set out in the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports, close brackets. In new paragraph F, old paragraph E of decision 19AA, after improve the traceability, we would add or assessment of legal acquisition, so that it reads improve the traceability or legal acquisition of eels in trade, and also add after the brackets and aquaculture and share these with the Secretariat. In decision 19BB, we would make a few insertions to paragraph A. So after Anguilla, again, we would add, comma, transit and importing parties. After implementation of decision 19AA, we would add, comma, any information sought in notification 2021/18 not already provided, and then let the paragraph continue, and delete the text from notification 2021/18 on eels through to information, and include, sorry about that, include especially, so that it reads, I'll read the whole paragraph given there's a few changes in that one. So 19BBA, issue a notification inviting range states of European eel, brackets Anguilla, close brackets, transit and importing parties to submit to the Secretariat information on the implementation of Decision 19AA, comma, any information sought in Notification 2021-18 not already provided, or any updates to the information previously submitted in response to notification to the parties number 2021-18 on eels, comma, especially information on the current levels of or emerging trade in specimens of Anguilla species. And lastly, in 19DD, paragraph A, we would include after Convention for European Eel and the applicability of developing a specific resolution, so that it reads, to improve the implementation of the Convention for European Eel and the applicability of developing a specific resolution to the parties or to the Conference of Parties as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom, and thank you for also providing those in advance to the Secretariat. Helpful for us to be able to follow the changes. So with those suggested changes, well, clearly the floor is open. I see the United States wish to take the floor, so you.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports adoption of the draft decisions on eels, Anguilla species, as proposed by the Standing Committee and the Animals Committee presented in Annex 1 of document CoP19 Doc 61. However, the United States suggests keeping text in 19BBA and 19DDA that the Secretariat recommended deleting. These decisions will help continue to track current levels of and emerging trends in trade in species of Anguilla species, address illegal trade in eel species, and aid with the enforcement challenges. We also agree with the Secretariat's recommendations to delete Decision 18.197 to 18.202 as they have either been implemented or will be replaced with the proposed draft decisions in 19AA to 19DD. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. So, United States, could you perhaps just repeat again for us so we capture your intentions correctly, especially where you didn't agree with text that the Secretariat is proposing to delete. So if you could just repeat that slowly so we capture it properly. Thank you.
Keeping 19BBA.
Sure. However, the United States suggests keeping text in 19BBA and 19DDA that the Secretariat recommends deleting. Is that clear?
Thank you, United States, yes.
Thank you, Chair.
So we don't have any more requests from the floor from parties. I'll ask, before we kind of sum up, I'll ask Secretariat, or European Union, sorry. Yeah, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the European Union and its member states, we'd like to thank the Standing Committee for the preparation of this document. We'd also like to say that we're talking about a global population, and in accordance with the CM, the characteristics that should be made for non-detriment findings should cover all of the population of Anguilla. Thank you.
So thank you for that observation, European Union, but it doesn't seem to me that you're looking for any amendments to the text at this stage, but you can tell me if I got that wrong. Having no further requests from parties, I then will offer the floor to observers. So if there are any requests for the floor, I see IUCN, so you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is given on behalf of IUCN, Traffic, WWF, and ZSL. The documents submitted to the 75th meeting of the Standing Committee on Anguillid Eels, SC 75 Doc 12, outlined a number of ongoing challenges that were identified in the report entitled Status of Use and Trade in Anguillid Eels, contained in Annex 4 to document SC 74 Doc 64.1. It is our opinion that while there has been a huge amount of cooperation and collaboration to address these, many are ongoing and were previously identified in reports submitted to CITES in 2018. As such, due to the complex global patterns in eel trade, we believe that further efforts are required to address the challenges summarized within the document for all Anguilla species in international trade. We therefore support the recommendation for key export and import and re-export countries who did not respond to notification 2020/018 to do so. We are pleased to see that the amendments to the decisions as proposed by the UK delegation, which recognise the need for strengthening both coordination between export, import and transit countries of Anguillid eels and reporting of said trade. Additionally, as many of these issues are ongoing, continued measures for Anguillid eels are warranted, and we support the proposal to develop a resolution for the genus. Finally, we would like to draw the parties' attention to the 2023 International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, ICES, Advice for the European Eel, published earlier this month. ICES advises zero catch for all life stages across the species' entire range, and that all non-fisheries related anthropogenic mortalities should also be zero. The ICES advice reflects the scale of concern for the species across its entire range, and all parties harvesting and or trading European eel should be mindful of this. Thank you.
Thank you, IUCN. Before concluding on this, I was going to offer the floor to the Secretariat to maybe explain why some of the texts they had proposed for deletion and which the United States wanted to retain, to explain their rationale behind that. So, Secretariat, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I understand correct, the United States is referring to the text within 90 days of the close of the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, which we had proposed for deletion. The main reason we have proposed this, and we have done this in all decisions where there is a 90-day time-bound instruction to the Secretariat to issue notifications, for the reason that the decisions are only numbered and come into force 90 days after the meeting. So it's kind of impossible for us to issue a notification before this time. And that is the reason why we have proposed deletion of this text, and we have done it as a general rule in decisions. This does not mean that we intend to delay issuing the notification. It's just, in practical terms, it does not make sense to retain this text. So I hope that clarifies our suggested deletion.
So with that explanation, United States, would you then be content for that text to be deleted, as suggested by the Secretariat?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for that, or thank you, Secretary, for that explanation, and yes, we're fine with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Just one moment. Right, just to conclude on this item, on eels, anguilla species, we've had a number of changes proposed by the United Kingdom, which they have read out into the record. But what I suggest we do now is that we ask the Secretariat to produce a ComDoc so that this can come back to the committee and everybody can see the text in front of them with the amendments made, and then we can consider it more fully. So if parties are content with that, and I don't see any requests from the floor, then that's the action that we will take, and we can close discussion on this item for now, noting that we will come back to it later. So that brings us on to document 77 on queen conch, Strombus gigas. And for this, I will ask the Secretariat to introduce the document. So, Secretariat, you have the floor.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Chair. So document 77 was prepared by the Secretariat, and it reports on the implementation of decisions 18.275 to 18.280 on queen conch, or Strombus gigas. Concerning decision 18.275, the Secretariat notes that range states of queen conch already report on activities that are referred to under this decision to meetings of the CFMC, OSPESCA, WICFC, CRFM, and CITES working group on queen conch. I'll call it the queen conch working group from now on, so it's not so complicated. So these meetings are attended by member countries that engage in the harvest and management of and/or trade in queen conch, and include people from national institutions, entities and authorities responsible for the implementation of policy, legal and operational aspects of fisheries management, and/or implementation of CITES. So the Secretariat proposes a new decision that makes specific reference to this working group on queen conch to avoid the need for parties to report this information twice. The Secretariat also proposes to add an instruction for the Animals Committee and the Standing Committee to consider the reports of the meetings of the queen conch working group and make recommendations based on their conclusions. And these working group reports include many important conclusions and recommendations that will be useful in developing targeted actions by CITES in relation to queen conch. The document reports on several recommendations on conservation, trade and management of queen conch coming from the meetings of the queen conch working group, and also its scientific, statistical and technical advisory group, or STAG, including several projects that are in the planning stage. The report also provides some information on the Blue Biotrade project on queen conch, where the Secretariat has been working closely with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, or UNCTAD, and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, on a project entitled Seizing the Trade and Business Potential of Blue Biotrade Products for Promoting Sustainable Livelihoods and Conservation of Marine Biodiversity in Selected Organization of Eastern Caribbean States countries. The overall objective of the project is to empower small-scale coastal producers from OECS member states to produce and trade queen conch products in domestic, regional and international markets under the Blue Biotrade environmental, social and economic sustainability criteria, including CITES provisions concerning international trade in the species. So the beneficiary countries in the first phase of this project are Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And in this context, I would like to draw your attention to a side event that will be co-hosted by CITES, FAO, and UNCTAD, entitled CITES and Fisheries, Partnerships for Legal, Sustainable, and Traceable Trade in Commercially Exploited Aquatic Species. And this side event will be held on Friday, 18th of November, in Canal 3 at 5:15. So returning to this document, based on the outcomes of the meetings of the Queen Conch Working Group, the Secretariat has concluded that parties have faced several challenges in recent years, in part due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result, there has been little progress made by parties since the previous COP. It would appear that much work remains to be done to fully implement the COP18 decisions on Queen Conch. And the Secretariat is of the view that it is important for this work to continue and for the Conference of the Parties to monitor its progress. Consequently, the Secretariat proposes a revised set of decisions that seek to avoid the need for range states to produce similar reports to CITES and the Queen Conch Working Group, focuses on those elements that are of greatest concerns to CITES, and makes reporting lines clearer. So you can find these proposed draft decisions on Queen Conch in Annex 1 to the present document, and the Secretariat also recommends the deletion of decisions 18.275 to 18.280. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Some positive work underway there with a collaborative approach across a range of bodies. But we are invited to adopt the draft decisions in Annex 1. So I open those to comments from parties. So I see Jamaica, followed by the United States, followed by the European Union. So Jamaica, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time that Jamaica is taking the floor at Committee 1, we wish to reiterate the sentiments of our colleagues in thanking and congratulating the government of Panama for hosting COP19. Chair, Jamaica supports the recommendations of the Secretariat and wishes to thank you for this opportunity to make a few brief remarks on Queen Conch. Since COP18, Jamaica has continued to carefully manage the fishing of its Queen Conch stock. In 2019 and 2020, the industrial fishery was closed to allow recovery after management-based diver surveys indicated that closure might be necessary. Closure was not due to any failure of management, but rather the observation of the precautionary principle and on reports of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. In 2021, it was reopened with a reduced national total allowable catch. In May 2021, the first non-detriment finding study for Jamaican Queen Conch was completed. It generally showed that the Jamaican Queen Conch industrial fishery was being managed in a sustainable fashion and that the stock was in acceptable condition. Also, Chair, Jamaican traceability capacity was significantly enhanced. Thank you. My apologies. If I may just restart. Also, Chair, Jamaican traceability capacity was significantly enhanced by the completion of 3 Queen Conch genetic profiling studies between 2017 and 2021. These indicated that there was a weak connection between the Jamaican Queen Conch stocks and those in the Bahamas, Belize, Honduras, and the Dutch Antilles to the south. The Jamaica stock appears to be distinct from another down current stock in Mexico, and it seems to be self-recruiting. There is now the potential for improved traceability of exported Jamaica queen conch product. In closing, Jamaica wishes to recommend a thorough examination by range states of methods for reducing processing waste by development of value-added products and to find more uses for shells. Chair, Jamaica wishes to thank you for this opportunity to contribute to the current meeting.
Thank you, Jamaica. It's useful to hear. The United States, you now have the floor, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. The United States is a range state for queen conch, and as the largest importer of queen conch, we are committed to ensuring that our imports of this species are legally acquired and sustainable. The U.S. has been an active participant in regional efforts to improve the conservation status of the species, including through participation in the Queen Conch Working Group of the Western Central Atlantic Fishery Commission, and we support the adoption of decisions to help strengthen queen conch management, data collection, traceability, sustainability, regional collaboration, and compliance with CITES requirements. As such, the United States supports the draft decisions 19AA to 19DD proposed by the Secretariat to extend the mandates articulated in these decisions on queen conch, given the importance of this work. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I give the floor to the European Union, followed by Belize, then the Bahamas. EU? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states and the Caribbean part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. We thank the Secretariat for preparing the document. Being range states to this species, we strongly support the collaborative effort to protect this species adequately. We support the draft decisions 19AA to 19DD in Annex 1 to the present document, and deleting decisions 18275 to 18.280. But we would like to retain decision 18.278 little b, and to be included into the new decision 19BB. Decision 18278B is directed to the Secretariat to provide assistance to range states of Strombus gigas on relevant enforcement issues and report new development in this regard to the Standing Committee as appropriate. The reason for this request is that we still see the need to address enforcement issues also in relation to illegal trade, next to proposed activities undertaken by the established joint CFMC OSPESCA WCAF CRFM CITES Queen Conch Working Group. Also, as mentioned in the document, under paragraph 12, the funds made available for implementing decision 18.278 is still to be allocated, if understood correctly. We are of the opinion it will be beneficial, next to the other proposed updates, to have the results reported back to the Standing Committee as appropriate. Further, considering the importance of regional cooperation, we welcome the opportunity for the relevant CITES authorities to collaborate in the joint Queen Conch Working Group. In this respect, we also appreciate decision 19BBC directed to the Secretariat to provide updates on relevant activities of the joint working group on queen conch to the Animals Committee and the Standing Committee as appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EU. One moment. Thank you. I now give the floor to Belize, followed by the Bahamas. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As Belize is the first time taking the floor, would like to congratulate you on your appointment as chair of this committee, and also thank the government of Panama for wonderfully hosting this event. Chair, Belize, as a member of the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism and also a member of the Organization of the Fisheries and Aquaculture Sector in Central America, note with great interest the proposed rule to include the queen conch in the Endangered Species Act of the United States. As a producer and exporter of queen conch meat to the United States, which is the main importer of this fishery product in the world, Belize would like to echo the concern of the CRFM member states regarding the possible implications of an Endangered Species Act listing of the queen conch. I'd like to draw your attention to a document that was produced by the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism and which was submitted to the United States government, where CRFM is asserting, is making the point that there has been significant work at the regional level to improve the management of the species through the efforts of the Queen Conch Working Group, which is composed of CRFM, OSPESCA, the Caribbean Fishery Management Council, and CITES, and also the Western Central Atlantic Fishery Commission of the FAO. And at the national level, there have been several efforts in the implementation of CITES requirements and regulations. Therefore, in proposing to list the queen conch under the Endangered Species Act, it is seen as if these efforts also need to be taken into consideration. While we recognize that there is need to improve the conservation status of the queen conch, we are convinced that listing the species under the U.S. Endangered Species Act may not be justified at this time, as the best available information at the country level within the OSPESCA and CRFM member states may not have been fully grasped and integrated in the document which is being used to justify the proposed ruling. If, however, the listing were to proceed, which we have no doubt that it will, and any protective measures are deemed necessary and introduced, they should carefully consider and develop in an inclusive, participatory, transparent, and holistic and integrated manner, taking into account the economic, social, environmental, and ecological considerations. The overall objective should be to ensure recovery and rebuilding of stocks and habitat where necessary in order to achieve responsible and sustainable use of the queen conch to meet the development needs of the countries and communities that rely upon the species. Finally, Mr. Chair, the CRFM is asking the United States to recognize the queen conch as a very important marine species in the CARICOM CRFM member states, where it is harvested and contributes significantly to local food security and nutrition, processing and for export, jobs, livelihoods, and social stability of several coastal communities. Mr. Chair, finally, I would just like to say that the proposed listing will have very negative effects on our countries that produce and export queen conch to the United States if it is listed under the Endangered Species Act. And I'm proposing on behalf of the fellow conch producers and exporters to ask the United States to consider the new information, all the new information that has been recently submitted, I believe, at the end, by the 7th of November. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Belize, and we note all those comments. I take it you're content with the draft decisions as they stand. Again, I will Well, I'll give the floor to the Bahamas, and the United States of America has asked for the floor again, and given the circumstances, I'll permit that. So Bahamas, then the United States.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the Bahamas' first time for COP19 and this committee meeting to address the conference, we would like to echo our colleagues in thanking Panama for their warm welcome and congratulations to your selection as chair of this committee for a productive meeting going forward, continuing and going forward. The Bahamas is a range state of this species, and we must remain on the pulse of protecting and utilizing this species in a sustainable manner, and we take into account the sentiments of our colleagues. We are in agreement with this document proposal and wish to express interest in joining the Queen Conch Working Group on this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. United States, I take it you may wish to respond to comments made earlier. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the representative from Belize for their comments. And just to note, the United States did propose the queen conch to be listed as a threatened species under our Domestic Endangered Species Act on September 7th, 2022. We currently have an open comment period that runs until December 15th, where we have asked any and all interested parties to submit information and comments to us. And we would appreciate any information that CRFM has and its members may wish to provide. We are also holding a public hearing that is open to all CRFM members, and they have been notified on November 21st at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and we welcome everyone's participations, and we will note participation and note Belize's comments for our record in our decision-making on our Domestic Endangered Species Act decision. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I now open the floor for observers. If there are any requests. I don't see any, so just give me a thank you, colleagues, for all your comments. It's clear that there is a lot of support for the draft decisions as provided in Annex 1 by the Secretariat. The EU made a comment that they wanted to retain paragraph B in what was old decision 18.278. No 19BB, so we will make that amendment. So with that, I think we can recommend adoption of the draft decisions in Annex 1 with that amendment, and we can also agree to the deletion of decisions 18275 to 18280. So that concludes, I think, our discussions on document 77. We now move on to item 64 on marine turtles, and we have two documents. 64.1, the report of the Standing Committee and of the Secretariat, and item 64.2 on the conservation of marine turtles. As these two documents are very closely related and potentially have overlapping text, I'm going to suggest we introduce them both one after the other and then invite debate on them both. So with that, I'll ask the Secretariat if they would introduce document 64.1. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This document has been prepared by the Standing Committee and the Secretariat. At its 18th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 18.210 to 18.217 on marine turtles, directed to the Secretariat, parties that are marine turtle range states, IQUIC, the Animals Committee, the Standing Committee, as well as other organizations. The global study on the legal and illegal international trade of marine turtles was shared with the parties AC31 and SC74. At its 31st meeting, the Animals Committee incorporated recommendations from the study of a scientific nature into draft decisions, and at SC74, the Standing Committee agreed to propose its draft decisions to the Conference of the Parties as presented in Annex 1 to the document SC74. Presented Annex 1 to the document. SC74 also agreed to renew Decision 18.217, which asked the Standing Committee to review the global study as there was insufficient time at the Standing Committee. The draft decisions are directed to parties, Secretariat, AC, and SC. The draft decisions directed to parties cover a wide range of activities, including developing framework for sustainable use of marine turtles, taking into account national and regional circumstances, developing science-based operational protocol for hatcheries where it exists, documentation of bycatch and mortality levels, sharing information and knowledge on bycatch mitigation and survivability models, and conducting research for the development of protection and conservation measures for marine turtle foraging, nesting, and migratory areas. The draft decisions directed to the Secretariat includes bringing to the attention of the AC and SC any significant changes in the illegal trade in marine turtles and liaising with CMS and its IOCA Marine Turtle MOU. The draft decisions directed to the Animals Committee invites the AC to make recommendations based on the information received, including the possible need of a new resolution on marine turtles, and the draft decision to the SC invites the Standing Committee to consider information brought to its attention and make recommendations. The Conference of the Parties is invited to renew Decision 18.217 and adopt the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to the present document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for that introduction. And I will now invite the United States, if they would, to introduce document 64.2. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The United States is pleased to introduce CoP19 Doc 64.2, Conservation of Marine Turtles, on behalf of Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Peru, and the United States. This document calls for the creation of a CITES resolution on marine turtles and builds on the decisions adopted at the 17th and 18th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to CITES. As background for this document, we remind CITES parties that COP17 adopted Decision 17.222, calling for a study on the legal and illegal international trade in marine turtles to identify areas where immediate mitigation efforts may be needed. This study and subsequent analysis by the CITES Secretariat examined the scale of marine turtle bycatch and its relationship to trade at the global level, providing evidence of continued illegal trade in marine turtles, and provide a set of recommendations. As a result of the work, COP18 adopted decisions 18.210 to 18.217, which urged parties to undertake a number of important activities aimed at addressing the illegal trade of marine turtles. We are very concerned about the illegal trade in marine turtles, species that are listed in Appendix 1 of CITES, and believe that CITES must prioritize action to combat the trafficking of specimens of these iconic species. The continual adoption of decisions on marine turtles and the reports from CITES demonstrates the need for a CITES resolution on marine turtles, which, unlike decisions, will not be time-bound and will ensure that the issue of illegal trade in marine turtles continues to be addressed at each meeting of the Conference of the Parties to CITES. Due to the need for timely action to address the increased illegal trade in sea turtles, the United States and its co-sponsors support the Secretariat's proposal to incorporate several decisions proposed in COP19 Doc 64.1 into the draft resolution proposed in COP19 Doc 64.2. We would, however, like to offer a few suggested changes, most of which propose to retain text that had been agreed upon by the CITES parties for inclusion in the draft decisions in COP19 Doc 64.1. The CITES parties can find these edits in an INF document the United States submitted, COP19 INF document 770. And we do have specific edits to propose. Should I present them now?
Yes, United States. Please, if you could do that now.
Thank you. We call CITES parties' attention to the proposed deletion of text in paragraph 2, recommending parties take action to decrease consumer demand for marine turtle parts and products. While we support the language proposed by the Secretariat in the preamble of the resolution, recalling Resolution Conf 17.4 on demand reduction strategies, we would also support retention of the text in paragraph 2 on demand reduction, given the importance of this issue and taking action to address it. We note that in the original paragraph 9, which is now paragraph 7 in the Secretariat's revised resolution, with the Secretariat's suggested edits, the new addition of morality is a typographical error and should be mortality. With respect to paragraph 12, we appreciate the Secretariat's efforts to combine draft decisions 18.AA, little a, and little d, and insert this text into the resolution. However, we note that some of the relevant text has been omitted that we would like to see included. Specifically, we would propose the following edits to paragraph 12. After bycatch levels, we suggest the following text be reinserted. While taking into account other threats to the population across their range, parentheses, number of turtles of different age classes taken from populations, parentheses, reproductive success, parentheses, number of turtles recruited per year, parentheses, natural survival probabilities, and marine turtle biology. At the end of proposed paragraph 12, we propose the following text to be reinserted. Taking into consideration the advice, resolutions, conservation, and management measures of relevant bodies, including competent fisheries authorities and experts as appropriate. Finally, in paragraph 12, we propose to clarify that frameworks need only be developed by parties that intend to engage in sustainable use of marine turtles. We propose inserting before the phrase, develop robust frameworks for any party that intends to engage in sustainable use of marine turtles. We urge all parties to support this important resolution and help CITES take the steps necessary to ensure the conservation of marine turtles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, United States, for introducing this document and making proposed edits and for taking into account the recommendations from the Secretariat. We have in these two documents clearly a set of draft decisions and a draft resolution, and there is overlap between them. So it is a fairly complex document. However, I will invite comments from parties to see what observations they might make and whether there are further suggested edits or not. And of course, in doing so, we'll then try and consider the best way forward. So I see a number of requests for the floor already. So first on my list is Samoa, followed by Brazil, followed by United Kingdom. So Samoa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. Samoa, for the first time, is taking the floor and would like to express our gratitude and sincere appreciation to the government of Panama for hosting us in your beautiful country. We would also like to compliment our dear Mr. Chairman on your leadership in chairing this committee. This intervention on item 64.2 is being made on behalf of the 7 parties of the Oceania region currently in attendance at this COP, namely Australia, Fiji, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Solomon Islands, and Tonga. From our regional pre-COP meeting, we know other parties of our region are deeply concerned about the conservation of marine turtles. We as Oceania nations highly value and are committed to protecting marine turtles as they are iconic species to us in our oceans. We acknowledge the need to continue to address the unsustainable use and illegal marine turtle trade and support the proposed resolution. However, small island developing states in our region face particular challenges in implementing this resolution, despite support from the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program for the Pacific parties. As such, we would like to suggest a similar text to COP18 Turtle Decision 18.210, paragraph C, be inserted into document 64.2. The new paragraph would read, directs the Secretariat to support parties upon request with the CITES relevant aspects of the development and/or implementation of the Convention for Marine Turtles, including building financial and technical capacity for the conservation of marine turtles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Samoa, and I think we have captured your text. Thank you. I will now give the floor to Brazil, followed by the United Kingdom. So, Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. As it's the first time we take the floor in this committee, we'd like to commend you on your election as chairman. We hope to work under your leadership constructively, so as we have 2 successful weeks. As co-sponsor of the draft resolution on document 64.2, we would like to echo the words of the distinguished delegate of the United States in supporting its adoption. Of the 7 species of sea turtles found in the planet, 5 nest in Brazil. Our country has a history of successful policies and actions for the protection of these reptiles, which are so dear to us all. At the international level, as a member of the Inter-American Convention for the Protection and Conservation of Sea Turtles and of several regional fishery management organizations, Brazil has supported the adoption of measures that reduce the bycatch and mortality of marine turtles. Nonetheless, we are still concerned by reports that marine turtles caught incidentally end up in illegal trade. The trafficking in these species undermines management and conservation measures aimed at protecting marine turtles. Hence, it is extremely important to ensure that this convention continues to monitor the trafficking in these species and work towards ensuring that marine turtles that are caught as bycatch do not end up in illegal trade. And Brazil, therefore, invites the parties to this convention to support the adoption of document 64.2 with the change proposed by the CITES Secretariat and further amendments proposed by the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I now give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by Colombia, and then Cuba. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK would like to thank the proponents for bringing forward this important resolution. International cooperation is a crucial element to addressing the range of anthropogenic threats facing marine turtles. We therefore welcome this resolution and strongly support its intent. However, as currently drafted, we have concerns that in places the resolution steps outside the mandate of CITES and encroaches on that of other bodies such as the regional fisheries management organisations. It is our view that both CITES and fisheries management bodies should work closely together to ensure a coherent approach to protecting and managing vulnerable species, respecting the different roles and competence to act. We therefore suggest the following drafting amendments which seek to ensure the role of CITES is clear. In the first, I will now take you through these changes and I will try and go slowly. In the first operative paragraph, we propose the deletion of national regulations and international obligations to be replaced by CITES obligations. Whilst we agree with the importance of effectively implementing national and international regulations to protect turtles, we consider this should be constrained to CITES obligation to best reflect our mandate. In paragraph 6, we propose deleting "and habitat loss and degradation," as this, again, goes beyond the remit of CITES. In paragraph 5, we propose a technical correction using scientific instead of forensic. Finally, we propose amending paragraph 7 so that it reads, recommends parties address the illegal trade in marine turtles by working with relevant bodies and others to ensure effective fisheries management measures are in place, and capture in fisheries is not undermining efforts to tackle the illegal trade, including at the national level. Introducing best practice measures to reduce and document sea turtle, targeted, incidental, and bycatch. Assessing catch mortality based on the best scientific data available, and increasing observer coverage to capture adequate data in fisheries where marine turtles are caught. We feel that this drafting better reflects the mandate of CITES and other organisations and the interaction between bycatch and illegal trade of sea turtles, and recognises the role of CITES in tackling this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. Now move on to Colombia, then Cuba, then India. So, Colombia, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. We'd like to congratulate you on your nomination to Chair, and we wish you every success. For Colombia, this resolution constitutes an opportunity to support, through international cooperation, the management and regulation of these species. The government of Colombia has established the protection of the environment as a priority, including biodiversity. 5 species of marine turtles have been registered in the Caribbean of Colombia, and they nest regularly. One of the cases is the Kerry turtle. Since 1960, we have adopted measures to restrict the use of that species with regional bans and the list of threatened species for the region. We've also carried out regional action with protected areas which are there and set aside for the protection of these species. And we have strategic actions for monitoring and surveillance for 4 marine turtles, in particular in the regional integrated management area in Antioquia. We also recognize the challenges that face in tackling the illegal trade in these species and the interactions with fishing activities, and we hope to overcome them, and that is why the adoption of this resolution is a unique opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. I now give the floor to Cuba. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. As it's the first time we're taking the floor, we'd like to congratulate you on your election as Chair, and we'd also like to congratulate Panama on the excellent organization of the meeting. Since 2008, Cuba closed all harvesting and capture of marine turtles, and the only experimental farm was closed and the specimens were freed. We have a minor installation in Cayo Largo, which has functions as a rescue center for nests which may be endangered. And from there, since 2005, we have released more than 2,000 specimens. The capture and harvesting of these species was banned from 2011, and it's listed as part of our national biodiversity. And this year we also approved the new criminal code, which defines as a serious crime the capture and illegal trade of these species. We also would like to inform the conference that at the request of the Center for Fisheries Investigations, where hawksbill turtle reserves of those that had been caught, which had been held until 2012, will be destroyed. More than 20 years have taken place since the last proposal, and the maintenance and keeping of these stocks is very expensive, and that's why we started the destruction process, which is done slowly for logistical reasons only, because it requires ovens from a nearby cement factory, and we'll inform you of that officially. So we support the draft resolution and the decisions in the documents 64.1 and 64.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Cuba. I give the floor to India, followed by European Union and then Japan. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Since India is taking the floor for the first time in the Committee 1, we would like to congratulate you on being elected as the chair of the committee and appreciate your leadership. As we had apprised the Standing Committee at its 74th meeting, India has adopted a marine turtle action plan for the period 2021 to 2026, which covers many of the aspects covered in the proposed draft resolution in CoP19 Doc 64.2. We support the adoption of a specific resolution for the conservation of marine turtles and would like to participate in any working group formed for this purpose. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. That's noted. My next speaker is the European Union, followed by Japan, then Senegal. So, EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states and the Caribbean part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. We welcome the report of the Standing Committee and the Secretariat in Working Document 64.1, as well as the idea of proposing a new resolution on marine turtles as proposed by Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Peru and the United States in Working Document 64.2. We agree that it is necessary to collectively step up efforts in protecting marine turtles to prevent further decline and extinction, and to ensure that the illegal trade in marine turtles is effectively addressed by CITES parties. To strengthen the work and avoid duplication, we see merit in merging relevant decisions of long-term nature as presented in Working Document 64.1 into a resolution, which also would address relevant updated elements of Resolutions 9.20. The EU and its member states, as well as the Caribbean part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, therefore support the way forward as proposed by the Secretariat in both documents 64.1 Ref 1 and 64.2. To be precise, we support the following. The revised decision 18.217 Ref CoP19 directed to the Standing Committee in document 64.1 to be adopted. 2. The amended resolution by the Secretariat as included in document 64.2, incorporating relevant decisions originally proposed in Working Document 64.1 and incorporated updated elements of resolutions 9.20. And finally, the repeal of resolutions 9.20. This does not mean we do not support the amendments made during the meeting today per se. We will need time to study them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to Japan, followed by Senegal, then Costa Rica.
Thank you, Chairperson. As commented by Secretariat, resolution COP 9.20 on the guideline for evaluating the marine turtle ranching proposal has already been adopted. And the draft decision in DOC 64.1 and the new draft resolution by US and 4 other countries in the DOC 64.2 has some overlap in their content. Therefore, we support the Secretariat's recommendation to consider a new draft resolution integrating them in the next standing committee and COP20 in order to avoid the duplication of the work efficiently and achieve the consistency in the relevant document on sea turtles. Basically, Japan supports the Secretariat draft resolution in DOC 64.2, but we have two comments in it. In the 7th paragraph of the preamble, beginning with recalling also that resolution conf point 17.4 in the introduction, Japan would like to add the wording of illegally taken before the word marine turtle part and product in the last line. This is Japan's first comment. Japan's second comment is that in the second paragraph of the main text of the resolution, beginning with recommend the party address the marine turtle bycatch in fisheries in the introduction. Japan would like to replace the third line of including observer coverage in fisheries where bycatch of the marine turtle is an issue with the following sentence: continue improving the observer program through the RFMOs/RFMBs framework in fisheries where bycatch of the marine turtle is not adequately addressed. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Japan. I now move on to Senegal, followed by Costa Rica and Peru. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. On these draft resolution documents 64.1 and 64.2, we would like to say, first of all, that turtle species within Senegal are fully protected. They cannot be harvested except for scientific purposes. And so we work on their conservation in Senegal. There are 5 turtle species in Senegal. And we have drawn up a national action plan for the protection and conservation of these turtles. But what we wanted to raise was the matter of training, because there's a need to consider that. So we would like to adopt these draft resolutions with a taking into account of the changes suggested by the Secretariat and the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I now give the floor to Costa Rica, to be followed by Peru, Singapore, and then Bahrain. And at that, I'll close the list for parties. So, Costa Rica, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Costa Rica is a signatory member of the Inter-American Convention for the Protection and Conservation of Sea Turtles, and also, of course, of CITES. And we have 5 of the 7 species nesting in the Pacific and the Caribbean, both in Costa Rica. We work on training of fishermen, ensuring that they are protected in fishing, and we're working for the conservation of sea turtles. And as a proponent country, we invite all parties to support the 2 documents, 64.1 and 64.2, and the resolutions and decisions within them, so that we continue to protect these emblematic species which exist and are known throughout the world.
Thank you, Costa Rica. I now give the floor to Peru, then Singapore, then Bahrain.
Gracias.
Thank you. Peru is a co-proponent of this document, and we look forward to having an opportunity to share activities. Since 2019, we have had our national plan of action in place for 5 of the 7 turtle species, and we want to work to ensure the survival of these species with 4 objectives: reduce mortality through bycatch, reduce fishing, and protect their areas for nesting, and continue to promote activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. I give the floor now to Singapore, and then Bahrain.
As this is the first time we are taking the floor, we would like to congratulate the chairman for your successful election. We would also like to thank the government of Panama for the warm welcome and excellent hosting of this conference. Singapore has a turtle hatchery in our protected marine park, where we have successfully released turtle hatchlings back into the wild each year. Additionally, as part of our research, we also track some of these turtles using satellite trackers so as to aid in their conservation. Singapore would like to support the draft resolution presented in document 64.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Singapore, for your brevity. Also, Bahrain, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since this is the first time Bahrain taking the floor, we would like to thank the Republic of Panama for hosting this important meeting, and would like also to congratulate you to chair this committee. Bahrain would like to welcome this document, and also would like to mention that we already enacted laws to control the hunting and trade of all types of turtles since 19th of the last century. Also, we prohibited trawling and fishing in order to control the bycatch of turtles. Also, Bahrain signed the MOUs with CMS in turtle conservation. We have also a monitoring program to monitor any type of mortality for these turtles. However, Bahrain, in conclusion, supporting this document. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bahrain. If you just give me a moment. So thank you, colleagues, for your patience. Clearly, we've had lots of support for draft decisions and a draft resolution, and clearly there's been lots of interventions relating to various paragraphs in the two kind of documents. It's clear we need a working group to be able to resolve all these in detail, and so that is my intention, to create a working group in the near future before we finish today, with the interpreters' indulgence, if that's possible. I do want to, I know I'm very conscious that we haven't been able to give that much time to observers on this particular subject. So if there are any observers who would like to make a very, very brief intervention, then I open the floor now. I may not be able to accommodate you all, but you will all get the chance to offer to participate in the working group. So with that, I will open the floor quickly for observers, but if your comments could wait to a working group, then that would also be helpful. Okay, and I thank you for your cooperation in not pressing the buttons. That's very helpful to us, really. I know it's a topic that is of interest to a great many of you, and a great concern. So I'm thankful for your kind of forbearance in maybe not making your interventions. So with that, I will invite participation in the working group, and I'll begin by asking parties who wish to participate. If you press your button when I read your name out, please press your button again so that you disappear from my list. So, parties, I have the Netherlands, followed by the Bahamas, followed by Côte d'Ivoire, followed by Panama, followed by the United States, followed by the United Kingdom, followed by New Zealand, followed by Australia, followed by Somalia, followed by Peru, India, Maldives, Japan, Benin, Malaysia, Singapore, Mali, China, the Czech Republic, Sierra Leone, Costa Rica, Indonesia, Philippines, Senegal, Tonga, the Comoros, Brazil, Antigua and Barbuda, the European Union, and Samoa. So if your name has been read out, please press your microphone button. So I think that captures all the parties. So I now invite, I ask the same of observers, if anybody would like to participate. Right, so Costa Rica, you're still on my list, but I think I've read your name out already. So I see WWF, Humane Society International, Sea Shepherd Legal, SPREP, South Pacific Regional Environment Program, the Convention on Migratory Species, Traffic, AZA, and PADI, P-A-D-I. And I think with that, we have very easily got a majority of parties in the working group. We will develop some terms of reference. We've heard all your interventions, so we know where there are requests to change things. So we will develop terms of reference. They will be along the lines of, taking note of the comments and interventions made here in Committee 1, for the working group to review the draft decisions in document 64.1 and the draft resolution in 64.2, taking into account the comments and amendments suggested by the Secretariat, which were supported by many, to come up with a set of revised decisions and a revised draft resolution which avoids duplication and redundancies, and we will ask you to focus specifically on the key paragraphs which have been the focus of interventions. We will look again to find a chair for that working group, so we will announce that at some point later as well. So we will, with the Secretariat's help, we will produce some draft terms of reference. We got all the participants identified. We'll provide a room and a date, and we will try to find a willing chair for this working group. It's a fairly complex, overlapping set of documents. I think, one moment. So just a brief conversation there, just to check there were no announcements needed from the Secretariat, and also to say, I did say that we'll provide terms of reference later on. We will provide those terms of reference first thing tomorrow so that they can be brought into the record of the meeting, and that's not just for this working group, but for the one that we created earlier on today. So that brings us to the end of our business today. We're running a little bit behind schedule. Just one moment. We're just discussing how we handle the remaining items that we've not managed to open yet this afternoon. So, as I said, we'll provide terms of reference for today's two working groups first thing tomorrow. We will continue first thing tomorrow morning with our next two documents, which are on sharks and marine ornamentals, before then moving into the rest of tomorrow morning's agenda. So a bit of a knock-on spillover, I'm afraid. So with that, and with thanks to the interpreters for their indulgence, I will now close this afternoon's session of Committee 1. Thank you all, and I hope you have a good evening. Thank you.